final section of Chapter 6, Part 4 here is Culture, Gender, and Listening. That's a relatively straightforward set of concepts here. Your text does not go into a great deal of detail, but there are some really deep differences between cultural norms and the way different genders communicate. So simply put, understand that there are oftentimes major differences in the way that we use language between cultures. Even if you're talking to someone who speaks the same language as you do from birth, or at least from the time that they learned language, they likely use that language different than you. I often see students who are writing reflections on traveling to Europe and how they use English differently in the UK than we do here in the States. And if you've ever experienced that, you've seen that. Translations never capture a full meaning. And understand also that if you're talking to someone who speaks your language as a second or a third or fourth language, that not everything that you say to them will translate clearly, and not everything they say to you will translate clearly. So there may be more give and take that is necessary when communicating across cultures, is the point. Nonverbal behaviors, as much as language, change from culture to culture. Nonverbal norms and these display rules, as they're saying, these listening cues and things along those lines, they will vary from place to place. So the amount of eye contact, smiling while listening, nodding, anything along those lines, they may vary quite a bit. And then depending on the culture, what kind of feedback you offer may also change. You have direct versus positive. It's an interesting spin that the textbook puts on it here. Direct feedback is being straightforward, blunt, saying exactly what you mean in response. And in the positive feedback, you can't see me, but I'm using air quotes here for positive. The text kind of focuses on being untruthful in your responses. But the idea is that even if someone disagrees with what you had to say in a culture that values social harmony, even if they disagree, they're not going to tell you to your face that they disagree with you. Or if they do, they're going to be very, very polite about it. And then different genders oftentimes will communicate differently. And I usually like to use this time to say that it's not necessarily about biological sex. Your textbook talks in terms of men and women. You have masculine and feminine communication styles. Masculine communicators focus on what's called report talk. Feminine focus on rapport talk. And they incorporate those same things into their listening styles. When it comes to rapport building, that is relationship building. And so when a feminine communicator listens, and so the focus is on women here, they listen in such a way that they hope to be liked more through the communication experience. So they're going to be more polite and supportive and empathetic in their listening style. Males focus on report talk, which is much more task-oriented and fact-based. And so males or masculine communicators tend to seek respect through the listening process. They're more likely to offer advice in feedback and even try to take over a conversation. So they'll listen oftentimes more quietly and more intently, listening for facts and those kinds of things, whereas a feminine communicator will listen for emotions geared toward empathy. When it comes to those listening cues, nodding, smiling, offering those verbal responses like go ahead, yes, things along those lines. Feminine communicators do that more than masculine do. Masculine communicators listen in silence more often. And then the amount of and purposes of listening. Men tend to listen less and women listen, men tend to listen less to women than women listen to men. This is really tricky, and don't use that statement to stand on in a disagreement you may have with a friend, because even your textbook acknowledges that there are some questions surrounding that theory. It's not accurate to say men and women here. It's accurate to say masculine listeners and feminine listeners. And that is a different thing. For instance, I am very much a male, and I am a feminine communicator. I focus on details, I pick up on emotions, I am empathetic in conversation. So I have a feminine communication style, even though that doesn't identify with the same biological sex that I am. And so that can go either way. I've known plenty of females that were also masculine communicators. So there's enough of a trend to call it masculine and feminine and associate that with male and female patterns, but it is not always accurate. So that is always something that you need to keep in mind when considering how people of different genders communicate.